and it is inspired by anti-Muslim undertone that we find extremely offensive. This bill violates the United States and Florida constitutions. There's a lot of contracts clause issues that will come up were this legislation to become law. And also there will also be a separation of powers issue that will come up. The separation of powers issue will be that the Florida legislator cannot tell judges in the state of Florida how and when to apply laws. The Florida Constitution is very clear, and the United States Constitution are very clear in that you cannot apply foreign laws that will take away the fundamental rights, liberties, and privileges of people here in the United States. So that makes this legislation quite unnecessary in our perspective. I want to bring to the committee's attention that in Oklahoma a similar law was passed, and right away as soon as the law was passed, it was challenged by advocates, and the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals immediately agreed with the lower court and blocked the Oklahoma legislation from becoming law. I bring this to your attention because were our state legislature to pass this legislation into law, our state in the past 2 years has already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars mediating legislation. Were this legislation to become law, there is going to be a lawsuit questioning the constitutionality of this legislation, and that's another financial burden in our state just to challenge and to defend this legislation on behalf of advocates that will be questioning its constitutionality. Again, the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of every state already make it illegal to implement foreign law that would deny the people their fundamental rights, privileges, and liberties, making this legislation a solution without a problem and a waste of energy and resources by our state's legislator. I also think it's very important to note that both the Florida Bar International Law section is strongly in opposition to this legislation. And I have emailed the coalition, which is again like Emerge USA, ACLU, the Florida Bar International Law section, and CAIR Florida. We have emailed you documents to your emails that I'm citing in my testimony today. So of course I can provide my information, and you can reach out to me if you haven't received those resources. We would love to make sure that you got them and have received them and can review them before your vote on the House floor. This legislation could adversely affect many communities within our state, including but not limited to Orthodox religious groups, especially Orthodox religious groups that have elements of their religiosity in their contractual dealings. So that's a really big worry for many minority communities and many minority religious communities within the state. Finally, and really importantly, on behalf of Emerge USA and just personally, this legislation is based off of the intention to marginalize and discriminate against the American Muslim community, as it is based off a model piece of legislation by David Yerushalmi. I think that there's no need to beat around the bush around this. There was an anti-Sharia law movement that kind of swept the nation, and we saw it get defeated multiple times. And I think that this legislation that we're dealing with today in this committee is based off of that model legislation by David Yerushalmi, who the New York Times, they tokened him as the man behind the anti-Sharia movement. Yerushalmi has a record of promoting anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, and racist views, and the legislation proposed by Florida legislators is nothing more than camouflaged bigotry, in my opinion. David Yerushalmi was also cited in the Southern Poverty Law Center's The Anti-Muslim Inner Circle, which was a top 10 list of personalities profiling that profiled personalities of people that promote anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States. I also think it's really interesting to mention those folks that in the Civil Justice Subcommittee that spoke in support of HB 351. One of them was representing Act for America. Act for America's founder is Bridget Gabriel, who is also on Southern Poverty Law Center's top 10 list of anti-Muslim inner circle. So I just think that there's a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric that's based off of the history of this legislation. I think it's very inappropriate for the American Muslim community and for just Americans that believe in the inclusiveness of all communities in the United States. Those in favor of this legislation seem to have heavy xenophobic attitudes, and the groups I'm here today representing find this to be discouraging and extremely disappointing. So we're asking you to please, please, please review this legislation and oppose it.
Thank you. Recognizing Ron Balboa with the ACLU of Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members. ACLU of Florida stands in opposition of this bill. We have so for the last several years. Simply put, I don't want to repeat a lot of what has already been said and take up a lot more time, but in order to be a global leader on human rights, we have to uphold our commitment to international laws and standards, and this not only includes honoring international laws, but refusing to enshrine discrimination and intolerance in U.S. law. Our courts have long recognized the importance and validity of international law, and the Supreme Court has said, quote, "International law is part of our law." This law is really a law of unintended consequences. Forbidding courts from considering the laws of other nations could have troubling legal implications. For example, couples who are married outside the United States and who wish to have their marriages legally recognized in our state would face troubles with this law. Parents who wish to adopt children from abroad, parents involved in custody disputes, parents who have had their children abducted abroad all rely on the ability of state courts to consider the judgment of foreign countries and foreign courts and the requirements of international law. There's simply no credible examples of the imposition of foreign law or Sharia law into our court system. The First Amendment, as has been said, of the U.S. Constitution and the Florida Constitution already prohibit U.S. courts from adopting any kind of religious law and protects our fundamental rights against the imposition. We cannot trade away our civil liberties for political advantage, and this bill would do something similar. Last year alone, 39 bills were newly introduced or carried over in from 2011 in 23 states, and almost all of them have failed to pass their state legislatures.
I believe this is a very unnecessary act, and it does have the smell of what the young woman from Emerge, Florida spoke about, where even your amendment, which speaks to allowing the decisions of a group such as the Bet did, is eliminating another possibility that is zeroing in on one area of law that happens to be a Muslim area and is a racist. Not that I'm accusing you of that. Believe me, I don't believe that is your motivation at all. But by following this pattern, it is a little too focused on one group that is an attempt to disqualify them from being part of this country. And I urge you not supporting this. Thank you.
Anyone else?